Hey everyone, it's Wowous. We're here with a Hearthstone video. Today we're going to be looking at the top 10 most used cards here in July 2019. And we've got a new expansion coming out in August, so this seems like an appropriate time to show this off. We basically have the meta more or less settled for this expansion right before the next one comes out in early August. Hope you're having a great Tuesday. It's a nice week here. It's finally cooled off here in the Northeast. It was like 100 degrees this weekend, so it's great to have a nice day here. So let's talk through this. So what we're going to do is count down from 10 to 1. These are from Hearthstone Replay, so hsreplay.net, and I'll put a link down in the description below. You can basically sort all sorts of analytical data about cards using that website, and we're going to look at the cards that are using the highest percentage of decks. Not the most played, and I'll talk about why that is as we go through, but actually the cards that appear in the most decks in terms of this. And we'll start with number 10, and I think you'll see that the meta is a little bit stale, and that there really isn't a whole lot that's getting used a significant amount of time. So let's start with number 10 here. Militia Commander. Militia Commander, obviously, is seeing a lot of use right now. It's a warrior card. It's getting used in basically every warrior deck that there is, right? It has a use rate right now of 16.2% of all decks have this card in it, which means that in reality, probably about 16 to 17% of decks are some version of a warrior deck right now, which means that close to 20% of the decks in the game are warrior. Why is this? Because warrior has by far the highest win rate. It's warrior than hunter. And then down at the bottom is Warlock and Priest in terms of the worst decks. But Warrior is just basically the only deck to play. It has so many strong legendaries, and it has great combinations with the neutral cards that are really strong as well. Military Commander is a very, very strong card. It's got the Rush. You get +3 attack. It's a 5/5 4-drop with Rush. Pretty much can take out most enemy minions when you drop it down. And a lot of times it's going to survive. It's going to survive those initial attacks. So that's number 10 on the list. Not a huge surprise. And then I'm sure that number 9 here is not going to be a surprise either. Eternium Rover. This is another warrior card, another staple of the warrior deck. Whenever the minion takes damage, it gains 2 armor. Similar to Militia Commander, it's got a 16.4% use in decks right now, so just a slightly higher than Militia Commander, but it's basically up there in terms of number 9 on the list. Sees a lot of use. This is about a perfect 1-drop for a warrior deck, so really no surprise there. Moving on, the next most played card, number 8, actually a classic card. Shield Block has become, for whatever reason, the must-have card. Now, warrior. This has always been a strong warrior card. I don't think it'll get rotated out in terms of being like a Hall of Fame card down the line. It's not overpowered, but we're seeing it get used because the buildup of armor is so important to those warrior decks. And again, it's getting used in so many decks right now. Same percentage, more or less, as Eternium Rover. It gets played slightly less because it's a higher mana cost, so in general the 1 cost get played almost all the time. The 3 costs get played less commonly. So that's number 8 in terms of the most played. Number 7 in terms of the most played cards, Brawl. Now Brawl has always been a highly, highly played card, especially in warrior decks, but I think it's probably peaked here in this meta in terms of this expansion because warrior's so powerful. It's at 17% played, so not particularly surprising. It's just getting played all the time, and it's really just a great removal. Anybody that's played against this knows you don't want to have a ton of minions out when you get brawled, and there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of combo this with death rattles and things like that just make this super, super powerful. And especially as we talk about these warrior decks, really the warrior deck has no issue creating new cards, creating minions, and it can basically outlast almost anyone. And this is Brawl is a big reason why. So not surprising there at number 7. Number 6 is, again, not a surprise, Warpath. Anybody that's played in the last month or two has probably got Warpath a dozen times a game. It feels like they just drop this over and over and over again with the Echo, and I feel like every warrior deck I run into clears the board at least once with Warpath. In between that and Brawl, it just makes it more or less impossible in many cases to take down the warrior unless you really get to them quickly. And so if you're late game, you're going to be in deep trouble with this Warpath coming out. So again, not a huge surprise here. Warpath's getting played about 17.2% of the time, so slightly more than a Brawl, but again, lower cost, which is why you're seeing that get used. Now, our next card at number 5 is not surprising at all. Dr. Boom. Dr. Boom, I've talked about this in the last time we did these videos. Dr. Boom, in my opinion, is broken. I think he is too strong. I think the fact that he has a really, really powerful set of hero powers, plus he gives the 7 armor, plus he gives all those minions rush. I think the battle cry is really the problem with this. If Blizzard looked to nerf this, the only way I think this would nerf well, like, I think they can either change the battle cry so that they don't have rush. I think they could maybe not give armor, but that's sort of atypical of these heroes, and I think they want to keep that. I think the hero power is fine. It's supposed to rotate, like it's a cool mechanic. Maybe the cost goes up from 7 to like 9 or 10, but he's just super, super powerful. And, basically I try to drop him when I play my warrior decks as soon as I possibly can. He's overpowered, and then he makes the rest of your deck even more powerful. So he just is almost unstoppable once they drop Dr. Boom on turn 6 or 7 if they have a coin. Dr. Boom, very, very strong. Not surprising. He's getting you 17.3% of the decks right now. Now, number 4 is not necessarily seen in the warrior decks. It's the only one on this list that isn't. But Mecharoo is just seeing a lot of use right now. And I talked about him in the last video I did a few months ago about he was seeing a high use rate in the previous set of expansions. And the reason for that is he's just a very strong one-drop. He summons, with a death rattle, another version of himself, so you essentially have 2. He's a mech, so he can combos with all the mech decks. And really, if you look at what else except for warrior is out there right now, it's basically like mech hunter and a few other mech type decks. And almost all of those decks can use Mecharoo. Mecharoo is used right now in 18.8% of decks at number 4, so not surprising. Number 3 is really the finisher that we all deserve, Leroy Jenkins. I've said it before, I'll say it again, Leroy Jenkins, I'm certain will get Hall of Famed, probably at the end of this year. He has just moved up as the other legendaries have gotten Hall of Famed out, as Sylvanas and Ragnaros, and all of those have gotten rotated out. Leroy has become more powerful to the point that he's really the only must-have classic, or not classic, it's classic, legendary in the game, in my opinion. If you're a new player and you're like, which legendary should I craft that I can keep, it's Leroy. As of right now. And again, if they go Hall of Fame, and if you're new to the game or whatnot, when they go Hall of Fame, you get all the dust back. So I would say if you don't have Leroy Jenkins, you need to craft him. He's getting used right now 19.4% of decks. Occasionally in a warrior deck, he can be a great finisher, but he's also used in a lot of other aggro decks like Hunter and some other classes right now as just sort of that finisher. And if there's certain decks that will give him plus attack, you can faceless manipulator him to have 2 of him potentially at the end of the game and do 12 damage. You can do a lot of face damage with him as long as you can get through taunt minions ahead of time. That's really the only time that Leroy fails, is if you don't have removal and you get stuck up against some hefty taunt minions. But not surprising to see Leroy at number 3. Number 2, Snip Snip. So it has come on the scene, right, as this sort of late edition, super powerful, magnetic echo, death rattle. I'm not sure why they dropped him, to be honest. I don't really understand who looked at the game and said, we need more mechs with magnetic and echo and death rattles. I think that was a mistake. but it is what it is. He's used in 41.7% of decks right now. So nearly half the decks had him, and they gave him away. So I think that's good in terms of if you're a new player and you were around when they gave him away. I don't know if they're still giving him away, to be honest. But when they did give him away, I think it's great if you can pick up a legendary for free and a golden legendary at that, that you can keep. You know, nobody's gonna uncraft him because he's super powerful. But he's a great addition to a lot of decks, and he, you know, you just see him everywhere because why wouldn't you play with him in any sort of mech deck? Again, 41.7%, a huge jump. Number 3, Leroy, was using 19.4%. That's almost double, it's over double the usage of Snip Snip in decks right now. And then number 1 is probably no surprise at all. It hasn't changed. It's our buddy Ziliax. I've said this in the previous video. I'll say it again here. Ziliax is the single best legendary that has come out in this game. He is used more than Ragnaros ever was. He's used more than Sylvanas ever was. They all were very, very powerful legendaries in their day. And maybe, you know, you talk about maybe the odds and evens, you know, Gen and whatnot. Yes, they got used an awful lot because they were 2 deck archetypes, but there were 2 of them, so it sort of split their use. Ziliax is used right now in 67% of decks. 2/3 of every deck have this card. I can almost never find a deck I wouldn't put Ziliax in, unless you're doing something that you know, requires you not to have him in, which I don't think of any decks right now have that. I think maybe in the next, you know, and I think he's only going to see more use in the next expansion because you've seen that they're releasing the cards like Reno and whatnot. They're doing the whole classic, if you only have one of each card in your deck, you know, this is what happens. Sort of that Reno mechanic. Ziliax is going to continue to get used in that same way. Now, he should be Hall of Famed. I would be shocked if they do Hall of Fame him, though, going into this next, you know, before the end of the year. I would be shocked if they take him out. Why? Because he's very balanced, to be honest. And because everyone's playing him, it's basically a wash in terms of he's basically got a 50% win rate. He's got a 51.8% win rate in decks. So he's basically 50-50, even though he gets used in 66% of decks. And the reason for that is quite simple. Because Ziliax is used in so many decks, it basically is a wash. So he's a must-have. He's a must-own card. You have to craft him if you don't have him. This is really, in my opinion, the one legendary that you must craft when you're a new player if you don't have him yet, or you got to open up enough packs to get him. But he is super, super powerful. We probably won't see a card this balanced and this strong again in the near future. I don't think we're going to see another 67% used card. Unless they really come out with something that's overpowered, that's a neutral legendary, but I think it's unlikely. So no surprise here, the most played card is Ziliax. That's our number 1 most played card. I want to talk quickly about some honorable mentions, some other cards that are getting a lot of use right now that maybe don't fall under the sort of warrior card. So, you know, Shield Slam is up there too, obviously. That's number 11. Unleash the Hounds, not surprisingly, at number 12, getting a lot of use right now. You see the Omega Assembly, Dynomatic, War Gear is the most played, one of the most played, other than Mekaru, neutral legendaries, or neutral common cards, I mean. So getting used a lot. And actually, after that, it's the Archivist, who I don't even have. But again, kind of this discover 5 cards, replace, you know, your deck with 2 copies is seeing still about 15% of play. So she's got a lot of use. And then another really common card is Explodinator, just a great card in a mech deck, great value for a 4-drop. So those are some of the honorable mentions in terms of the sort of non-warrior deck cards that you might see out there an awful lot. But for the most part, it's all warrior all the time, and then you just get Ziliax and Snip Snip up at the top. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more, definitely leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Definitely subscribe to my channel and hit that like button if you don't mind. Thanks so much for stopping by.